Hello everybody, here we are today talking about the Montreal Canadiens and how their recent slump has made their path to the playoffs a little bit more difficult. But before we get started with that, please make sure to subscribe if you're new to me or hockey, whatever the case may be. Being said, let's get on into it. So I do want to apologize because my voice is again still a little bit shaky here. But anyway, we're talking about the Habs, how in 1 month this team can be a side that I'm making a video talking about how they could make the playoffs. And then the next month, being this month, I'm talking about how their odds look a little bit more diminished. That's kind of going to be the case when a team goes 1-7-1 over a 9-game stretch, as is the case with Montreal. And I think that this, along with some other factors, have really made it much more difficult for the Habs to go out there and say that they can make the playoffs, which really does put extra emphasis on them getting out of the Four Nations face-off break in strong fashion and just getting a lot of wins as fast as possible. So we're going to be talking about some of those reasons why things just look a little bit harder, a little bit more unlikely for them to make it. So the first reason that the win is being taken out of Montreal's sails is the fact that a lot of teams, especially within their division, are doing better. The Tampa Bay Lightning are a great example of this. A little over a month ago, looked like the Bolts might miss the playoffs for the second time in just 12 seasons. Now they've got a 4-game win streak, an 11-point cushion, and a game in hand over Montreal, meaning that Tampa Bay has likely secured a top 3 spot in the division. At least it seems like it. So, Florida, Toronto, Tampa Bay, top 3, meaning there are only 2 spots left to make it as a wildcard team. And then you realize the team that is within the division, those pesky Detroit Red Wings, are making life hard again, as ever since they hired McClellan, they've gone 15-5-1. They are surging. They are a side that I think is really on the brink of actually getting through to the playoffs for the first time in a while. Last year, I thought it was going to happen. I made a video talking about how these aren't your brother's Red Wings. They're better. And then they ended up losing 7 out of 8, I believe, as Dylan Larkin missed those games. But I think this is different. I really do think it is, which is not good for Montreal in this case. And then you throw on the Ottawa Senators, who, yes, are on a 3-game losing streak, but had won 5 in a row before that. And you just realize how much of a pain it is because they're not even getting help from within their division, as it's really just Buffalo that has said, oh, we'll give you a little bit of a breather here. And on top of that, I think that another huge issue for Montreal is they're just running out of games. We kind of have an awkward point to say, oh, there's a lot of games left or a little bit. They've got 26 games to try to make things happen. And when you have that few amount of games needing the results you need, I just don't really like the odds there. On top of that, too, there are 5 teams between them and the final wildcard spot at the moment, meaning they're going to need some teams to play poorly. They're going to need to play well. And I think that at this stage, it might be a little bit premature, but I do feel like it's probably safe to assume the Red Wings are going to occupy one of the 2 wildcard spots. I know that kind of burned me last year, but I'm going to go out there and say it at this stage of the year now, meaning there is just one other spot for everybody to battle it out with. Granted, things can happen along the way, but I think another issue that could be holding this team back for right now is Montreal, I think, will probably be a little bit more conservative in terms of making deadline deals, where I think some of these other teams could be really, really aggressive, as they understand their opportunity to compete may not be as long-term as Montreal. So you have less games, less opportunities, more teams, and teams that could be much more aggressive than you, painting a picture for Habs fans that may not be super pretty, but it is just kind of the reality situation. And I think another thing that's kind of odd as well too is last year they had kind of similar-ish points this stage of the year, and then they went 8-13-8 over the course of the rest of their year to really just have a bit of a collapse. Last year we were talking about how it was going to be kind of a better year for them. This year we're talking more about playoff picture, but maybe that is kind of creeping up their minds a little bit. A lot of the roster is still relatively similar. They've got the same head coach saying, oh man, this was looking like it could be a good year for us, and now we just can't seem to find a win for a sustained period of time. Is this going to be something where the media is just going on and on in the offseason about how we played poorly to end out the year? I don't think we can really assume that over the rest of the 26 games, but there is a real possibility that they perform the worst out of the rest of the playoff sides that are competing. But I do think that there is some good news for this team. It may seem a little bit odd, but I think the results will actually be better than what they've been. You see guys like Evans that have been outscored 7-0 at, I think, 5-on-5. It might just be all strengths in general over the course of this 9 games. That's bad. But the expected results are not nearly as bad as that. He's not the only guy to be dealing with that at the moment, but certainly right now you are seeing a lot of these players where they're being outscored a lot in this time, and things are looking really grim. And it's hard to imagine them getting outscored 26-12 at full strength for the rest of the year, at least at that rate. So again, kind of tying back the Evans thing, that was, again, at full strength. But things should surely improve. They need to improve defensively, though. They've been allowing a lot of goals over this period. That's got to get better. One thing that's been good is they haven't really allowed a ton of goals on the PK, and they've also had 2 shorthanded goals in that time. So it kind of takes away some of that sting a little bit. And then you realize that if they can just get to be closer to what those expected results are at full strength, they have a much better opportunity to win because their strength of schedule is looking really, really good right now. 29th hardest remaining strength of schedule for the year. That is a good thing. And you realize that for 26 games, maybe they have opportunity to go out there and win 15 or more of those if things stack out the right way. I think it's really going to be pivotal here to get out to the right start. Not like we just talked about that earlier in the video, to kind of harp on it again, but they play teams like Ottawa, San Jose. I think they play Carolina, and then they have a back-to-back, I believe, against the Buffalo Sabres. 4 out of those 5 are really winnable. You see Ottawa, give them a 4-game losing streak. Add on to that, you see San Jose, 1-8-1 over the past 10. You see, of course, the Buffalo Sabres, bottom of the division, throttle them. Make sure that they stay in the basement of the Atlantic Division to really kind of set the tone early that, hey, we might have got stuck in a rut, but we're here to stay. We're up at the moment. So I think that the ability to get out to that start over those 5 games, maybe even steal one against Carolina, would set a great tone and say, we're not just dead yet. Give us a little bit of time to see if we're actually able to go out there and perform. But I do think at the same stage, too, there is a little bit of concern, maybe for somebody like Martin St. Louis, where if they have another collapse where you say, what do we do here? And I think that it's hard because there's a lot of articles talking about Martin St. Louis, and this team hasn't always been uber competitive, but at the same time too, back-to-back years where they could have a collapse, and then this year especially where it looked like they could make the playoffs, that might make the conversation regarding him a little bit more awkward. But I think there's other people to talk about there as well too. Patrik Laine, 1 point over his past 9 games. We know that he is more known for contributing more offensively. If he's not contributing offensively, especially scoring goals at a time when this team really could use a primary goal scorer, that is a huge concern because he was brought in to help alleviate things, to really be a difference maker. And if he's having quiet nights like that, what are you really supposed to say about him? Now, I'm not just going to say that it's him, because there's a lot of guys in this lineup that are having bad results at the moment. But I think it does put more pressure on those big names in Montreal's, locker room and their organization in general, like St. Louis, like Laine. Mind you, Laine has not even been there that long, but you score that many goals for the course of your career. You have some of the seasons you have, and you talk about having a career resurgence in Montreal. There are going to be a lot of whispers about this. Not even whispers, more chants, more just shouting, because this is such a passionate fan base. And I know people will say, a lot of Habs fans, we're a rebuilding team. We're not focused on the now, we're focused on the future. But at the same time, too, I feel like in a way that tends to turn into a coping mechanism for a rebuild that turns long. Mind you, the Habs have, again, a very young blue line that could be very good in the future, and they still have a lot of players that are very young. But I don't like hearing that excuse as much, because then it's, well, we didn't make the playoffs in a year where it's kind of wide open in a lot of ways, and we could possibly have a really bad collapse to end out the year, or at least play poor hockey after starting out 2/3 of the year pretty well in that fashion. And I just don't know. In a couple of years, do you keep using that excuse? Oh, well, we're a rebuilding team. Again, coping mechanism for a lot of franchises right now, as I'm trying not to laugh, but you are hearing that from a lot of sides that just can never really seem to break out of the cycle. I really actually do think that Montreal could be able to get out of that spot, maybe compared to some other teams, especially within their own division, like Buffalo, that just cannot seem to get things going, especially as some of those teams get worse in their division as they get older. But at the same time, too, it's just not a good look to have multiple collapses at the year. But I think that for right now, do I think Montreal makes playoffs this year? I'm going to say no. I think that the good times may be over in that sense, but I think they could still have a good end of the year, because if you do have an improvement on the season, if you are a little bit closer to the playoff picture and you have a ability to rebound from a stretch that really wasn't that good for you, then that is great. If not, I think it's more of a concern of, well, we were playing really poorly before the break. We came back into a very winnable stretch for the break. We maybe didn't take advantage of it. We maybe didn't take advantage of a overall strength of schedule that is winnable for us to an extent, and we saw other teams just really go past above and beyond what we needed to do. And that's, again, where I think this year could be kind of graded somewhere on one end of that spectrum. I don't really know if it'll fall in the middle, so I really am hoping that it does end on a positive note for Montreal. Again, I'm not trying to harp on it and just talk poorly about them. It seems that Montreal fans, being passionate, being very knowledgeable, I think in a lot of ways can kind of get heated and say, oh, he's just hating on us and he is a miserable guy. Not the case. I'm just talking about hockey here and kind of what I'm seeing at the moment. And like we talked about with Minnesota, they really do need to take things serious at the moment, probably even more so than Minnesota. if they want to make the playoffs. Again, maybe the expectations weren't necessarily to make playoffs at this stage of the season, or at the start of the season, I should say, but we are here now, and they could go out there and make it. And let's be honest, Montreal fans, rebuilding year or not, making the playoffs is always a fun thing. I don't want to hear the whole, we weren't supposed to get there, blah, 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 because then you also go out there and say, well, we made it to the Stanley Cup final that one year and we lost to Tampa where we nearly won it. Because it's a two-way street. You got to be thinking here with me. It can't just be a one-way street. But anyway, what are your thoughts on the Montreal Canadiens? Let me know down below in the comments. Will they make the playoffs? Will they not? Also, please make sure to like this video if you enjoyed it. Subscribe if you're new. Everybody stay safe. Have a great night. And you go hockey, all right. Goodbye, Brigadiers and Brigadettes. This is your captain signing off. Have a great night.